I've organized my presentation around 3 words, which are also 3 concepts, which are also 3 images that I find each time I read and reflect on Yuri Herrera's Science Preceding the End of the World: dwellings, borders, crossing. I'm going to briefly talk about each one of these in association with texts and images around the Mexico-US border that resonate for me with Herrera's text. I hope these remarks and associations will spark further associations, remarks, and discussion about the real and imagined space-times of signs, as also of our own. And I will note that I've included several slides of text in the talk, which I refer to but will not read in full. Feel free to pause the video to do so if you wish. The first story in the world is about safe passage, writes Teju Cole in Blind Spot, about the origin of the Tono Odom nation out of Babo Kavari Mountain, which dwells on but does not recognize the border and which crosses it regularly. I borrow the concept of dwelling from Lily Wong, who defines it as a strategic recollection of the past that repoliticizes our relationship to cultural and historical formations in the contemporary. To dwell is to reside continuously in the past. It is actively inactive, ongoing, consistently in a state of suspension, relentlessly becoming with no clear origin or endpoint. I find that Makina and signs, like the Tono Odom in Cole's piece as also in internet documents produced by them, dwell on a border at the same time that they dwell in a state of suspension, within which that physical and affective border is meaningless. And I find in Babo Kavari a visual correlative of Herrera's Place Where the Hills Meet. On the border, as the photo accompanying Cole's brief essay Sasabe tells us, are walls and crosses, signs of a border and signs of death. I find in Josh Begley's 2016 video piece Best of Luck with the Wall, stitched together from over 200,000 photos from Google Satellite, a perspective that simultaneously acknowledges the sheer presence of the wall, the border, both as it and they exist physically and in the full extent of its imaginary, and also how it dwindles to a thin line or fully vanishes when viewed at the scale of the landscape, ocean, desert, mountain, and river, through which it runs. For me, much of the intensity of Herrera's novel comes from the unresolved tension between the power, will, and control of Makina's actions and Makina's voice, and the moments where we feel her nearly vanish under the weight and scale of the systems surrounding her.
Y nada de tu amante alma, que el destino indestructible me obliga con pena dejar de marchar.
As rhetoricians like to recount, the word metaphor comes from a Greek verb meaning literally to carry across, or, metaphorically, to move one or more features of one thing to another. A metaphor is literally a crossing, and figuratively a bringing together of disparate things, an unresolved tension between what is like and what is also unlike. Herrera's novella is densely metaphorical throughout, from the names to the places to the unstable boundary between life and death, our world and the other world. There are 2 places for me where Herrera dwells most intentionally and reflexively in metaphor as crossing. The first is the homage to, or maybe revision of, the title metaphor of Tim O'Brien's celebrated novel of Vietnam, The Things They Carried, that's in the text. Herrera's version, in which, as in O'Brien, things are fully and simultaneously material weight that is carried, and each person's figurative burdens, what we dwell on, each of us, and what makes each of us, us. The second metaphor is the one I'm certain we'll be talking a lot about on Wednesday, Jarchar, or in Lisa Dillman's felicitous translation, verse. And I note in passing that the word translation itself derives from the Latin word for metaphor, and also means, literally, to carry across, while verse comes from the Latin verb meaning to turn or to bend. Verse always tends towards metaphor. I'm not going to belabor the exit, but I do want to dwell briefly on the origins of the karcha or jarcha in what historians call the Muslim-Jewish-Christian convivencia, or living together, of Andalusia in medieval Spain. These brief verses are mongrel forms, written in a very early Romance dialect known as Mozarabic, which was spoken primarily by Arabic-speaking Jews working in the Muslim courts. They were composed, scholars argue, as brief rhyming colloquial codas, or exits to a much longer Arabic poetic form known as the muwasha. Typically, the muwasha would be voiced by a male courtier in highly coded figurative language. The karcha provides the kind of quick, earthy, highly affective, and usually effective rejoinder in which Makina is so well versed in signs. For me, the karcha or exit dwells on a border that, yes, is an exit, but also somehow an opening. So I want to exit this presentation with the conclusion of Begley's video as the Rio Grande exits into the Gulf of Mexico, accompanied by a karcha from the Andalusian poet Judah Halevi, most famous for his never-satisfied longing himself to cross the sea from Iberia to Jerusalem.